Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Good morning, Daniel, and how are you doing?
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I'm fine, and want to follow up on yesterday's program. A lot of interest expressed yesterday, and a lot of interest, around the world, and people are talking about what are the ramifications now that Trump has made the official announcement that the U.S. position is that we will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And it has a great deal of significance, and it's been going on for a long time, exactly what would happen to Jerusalem. There's been a lot of changes going on since World War II and 1947. The UN was very much involved. There have been several wars trying to decide this issue, and now it still lingers. And of course, in 1995, we had that resolution passed bipartisan, strong bipartisan support, and a Democratic administration said it's official policy. We will and we shall move the capital, our embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So the die had been cast a long time ago. It wasn't something that Trump invented yesterday or the day before. Matter of fact, this whole idea came up, during the campaign. There was a lot of talk about this, and like other presidents, like almost all the presidents in recent history have taken this position, and like the political parties, the leadership, and many people in finance and banking, different areas all supported this, but some of the polling that has been done over the years has not been supported by grassroots efforts, even though the Democrats have been stronger supporters of Israel, or at least they've been known to be stronger supporters of Israel. But when they do polling, generally speaking, including sometimes polling with American Jews, that they're not that gun-ho over all of this. So it's an interesting thing to sort out, but we want to spend a little bit of time today about the ramifications of this and a little bit more about how we got here and why bipartisanship isn't our favorite term, because when you see bipartisanship, my issue is be alert, be aware of what's going on if two parties can be so strongly in support of certain issues in defiance of some general polling and data that shows that the people may not be with them.
Yeah, and we never promise to have all the answers on this show, but we do promise to try to ask as many of the questions as we can. The question is, there are many questions, the bipartisanship, whether this is in the U.S. interest, what got us to this point, as you point out, that presidents from Clinton on at least have promised to do this, often for domestic political reasons. Michael Tracy, who was actually here in the studio a while ago, is a very astute journalist. He had an interesting tweet, and I think it kind of captured what we were thinking about when we were thinking about the show. He said that Trump's most condemnable actions, the Jerusalem announcement, Syria strikes, Wall Street pandering, tend to be those most grounded in bipartisan consensus and therefore inspire a comparatively little outrage. That is a really good, succinct point, I think.
And would he argue that there will be and is no outrage from this current event?
Because, like the Syria strikes, both of the parties in Washington agree with it.
Yeah, I
you don't
understand
get the outrage in Washington because both sides agree with it, really.
Although that doesn't cancel out the possibility of outrage come this weekend or something.
Elsewhere, yeah.
When they're lining up to express an outrage.
And that might explain why the Democrats are so focused on Russia, because they don't disagree with Trump on most of these things that he's doing, the strikes in Syria, et cetera.
But obviously there was some disagreement in the administration before this happened. I mean, there's an article out about Tillerson and Mattis took a position that it was not a good idea, and they argued opposite of what the speech said. They said it was a danger. It posed a danger, and that we would not get general support around the world, and it could be a threat to peace. It wouldn't be a movement toward peace, and it could cause immediate danger in the embassies, and these are the military guys. So that was their expression, but evidently there were others, maybe a son-in-law, is it, that might have had some influence on what came of all this?
Yeah, and the embassy thing real quick here is interesting. Matt Lee, who writes for AP, is a diplomatic correspondent, he published a list, he tweeted a list of embassies around the world that are facing additional security concerns because of the announcement. And I think it was about 25 embassies. There's quite a few. Wow. It's pretty significant. But yeah, the issue of Jared Kushner and his role in this is really interesting, because a lot of people have suggested that there's a collusion going on with Netanyahu, who's a Kushner family friend, I think he stayed in their house in New York when he was there, even before the campaign with this UN resolution. That's what Russiagate has turned into, really, although they're not talking about it. So,
I wonder if anybody dare challenge and say that maybe there's a double standard for being charged for collusion. I mean, when you think of what's going on now with all the court cases, hey, he actually talked to a Russian.
Yeah.
Well, what did he talk about? Well, who knows? And there's all the pros and cons on an argument, which gets so complicated. I don't even enjoy trying to figure out everything. But it is expected. Matter of fact, it's a political negative if you don't really know exactly what the Israeli government wants. I mean, this has been going on for a long time, and certainly since 1995 with this legislation. But this legislation doesn't just pop up, and it happens routinely. And the people, and everybody knows that a very influential lobbying group is AIPAC, in Washington. So it seems like that had an influence. But Tillerson and Madison, I think, is a significant issue. And also, it's been seen, and there's been some writing about this, that it was bipartisan. And when you look at it, the leadership are very solidly in favor of this, and there was a lot of politicking going on here, which is not something sinister and necessarily evil as usual politics, and that is, how do you get some votes away from the Democrats to the Republicans? And over the years, the Republicans have never done as well with the Jewish community as the Democrats have. And the Democrats have been in a conflict because they're generally more progressive, not only progressive in the good sense of anti-intervention, but progressive on the social issues, and we would agree with a lot of that. They were, and the Republicans wanted to cut into that, and Trump evidently has done this. He's been able to get support and not lose the support of the evangelicals. And there's a coalition now that has come together where the Jewish progressives will not worry about some of the social issues and even align themselves with evangelicals who on the social issues they might have strong disagreement with, and go along and they say, well, they're right on Israel and they'll be aggressive. And Trump developed a position there that looks like, there'll be no serious ramifications here. It might even, dampen any deep state enthusiasm for impeachment. I would think that that's a possibility.
That's an interesting point. But I think, you're talking a little bit about this article. Is it Mark Perry in the American Conservative,
Right.
which he made that interesting point, which is that, okay, Trump has got American evangelicals on his side, and they're very pro this move. But there are also some Democrat Jewish hawks. They're hawks on Israel, but they're more dovish at home. And I think, I don't want to misinterpret what Perry's writing, but I think what he said toward the end of his piece in today's American Conservative is that peeling off some of these Israel hawks on the liberal Democrat side is something that he's done, and is something that he views as politically advantageous to him. That may well be a good point.
Yeah, and I think along that line is what is it that Netanyahu will think this means versus what Trump said versus what other communities think, and even the Jewish community in this country. And it's very clear that Netanyahu believes that when you talk about the capital being, Jerusalem, he thinks big time. He doesn't think a little bit, half of Jerusalem. He thinks all of Jerusalem, and that is a position he understands. Now, Trump did not. He did not explicitly say, oh, no, we're only talking about this. But he never said anything about East Jerusalem. I mean, he never outwardly supported this whole idea. Well, if you know this happens, the one big advantage is, and this will help Israel, they will follow through with the assumption that they will be in charge of the entire city. But I think it's established position that the Israeli government generally, and Netanyahu in particular, believe that if the capital's there, and we sort of dictate to the world. The Israelis have essentially called it their capital, in the midst of this mess that's going on, who owns half of the city and this sort of thing. So I think that this in itself will be a challenge even diplomatically here in this country when they start, talking about the details. What's going to happen, because Jordan didn't particularly like this whole thing.
Put them in a real uncomfortable position.
They're next door on that. So this is, I think, an interesting point that there will be assumption by Israelis that now that the United States has given us a green light, that means all of Jerusalem is now the capital, which might be more symbolically thinking about the future rather than saying tomorrow they're going to change their position militarily speaking.
Yeah, and that's what Justin Raimondo, who we read on antiwar.com, we don't always agree with him, but he's always insightful. That's kind of his thesis in the column that he put out today. That don't worry, Trump is just a showman, he's just an actor, he's just a blowhard. If you look at the fine print, he did not say all of Jerusalem is going to the Israelis. He's just trying to satisfy a faction of his followers. He's going to drag his feet, drag his heels. He did say it might take years. It may never move. It may be a symbolic move. That could be the case, but you still have the implications. And some of them, I have to say, are from our perspective, are pretty positive. First of all, a lot of people who are not calling for intifada and not calling to rise up, a lot of people in the Arab world are saying, you know what, who cares what America says? It doesn't change anything about what we feel about Jerusalem and Palestine. And so in some ways it makes the U.S. less relevant in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Abbas, the president of Palestine, already said we do not want the U.S. to be at the center of the negotiating between us. So if we become less relevant, it's a plus for non-interventionists at home.
Yeah, we mentioned that yesterday, thinking that this could turn out that way to our benefit, even though politically speaking, somebody might consider this a negative and argue why they have to be more cautious. But Kushner claims that there are some people are assuming that he might want it both ways, and can he have it both ways? One, achieving, us declaring that Jerusalem is the capital and we move our embassy there. At the same time, the real problems, and you've already indicated that there's not an assumption that there's going to be a lot of demonstrations in this country. There may be some over there, but Kushner wants it both ways, that he can accomplish this or get the president to do it. At the same time, he believes, probably as Netanyahu, when he talks about it, he sounds very sincere. This is a good move for peace. This is a move for peace and for security, and the world's going to be better off. And that's what Kushner's they claim Kushner's position is that there's really some good that's going to come from this, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be perpetual war or a new major breakout of war between the Jews and the Arabs.
Yeah, but it's almost like if you and I are having an argument, we each have knives, and then the other guy pulls out a gun. You will have a type of peace. You'll either back down or get shot. But so I wonder about that. I wonder, is Kushner's so-called peace plan for the Middle East dead in the water right now after this move? Or will it, and this is what some people argue, I don't know if I buy this, or will it give Trump some wiggle room to say, listen, Netanyahu, I've given up on the embassy thing, I've given you this, you're going to have to back off on these things. I don't know what the answer is. I think that's a little optimistic, but that's what some people argue.
Yeah, and that'll have to remain to be seen. But certainly we will be watching this very closely. But I think that right now it looks like it's been a major victory for Trump. I would think, politically speaking.
At home,
yeah, at home here. Internationally, a big question goes up. But the concern about, will this stop the peace process? That's no. This is going to stop it cold and track. There will be no peace process. But I see others questioning the details. Where is the peace process? What's really going on? Were they on the verge of peace breaking out?
Yeah.
So, and some people actually even suggest that maybe it's in their interest. The real radicals on both factions sometimes stir up trouble, even in the Middle East in particular. You know, when there's a sincere effort between the Palestinians and the Jews to getting together, maybe the radicals on both sides might cause a violent event to ruin the peace process. So, but the actual peace process, it has to be behind the scenes because nobody reads about it and what they're doing. And I quite frankly never have had a whole lot of confidence when I hear that the United States have a couple people in a room and they're working on a peace program.
For someone else.
Yeah.
It's not our conflict. Someone else wrote, and I think this is a good point, that arguably the move that Trump made yesterday is most helpful to Iran, of all places, which as we tend to, as much as they say they hate Iran, they tend to help it in every turn. But they said that it really shows the rest of the Muslim world that the Saudis and the others who are allied with the U.S., who are close to the U.S., Kuwait and others, they are really not the defenders of the Palestinians. They're not the defenders of Arabs. You know, they're in the pocket of the West. So maybe Iran will be the winner. But my closing statement would be making fun of someone I don't like very much, and I hate to be so rude. But Nikki Haley is not my favorite person. And here's what she tweeted yesterday. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, our top diplomat at the UN. Following the President's historic announcement to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, we remain committed to peace in the region.
It makes your stomach a little upset at times.
Good old Nikki. She always gives us new material.
Yeah. No, I think the big warning sign is that we are pursuing and having something accomplished, and it's bipartisan. I wish that was always good, but bipartisanship has been known to bring about some of the worst things out of Washington. And if you look at the political party platforms, the presidential platforms over the decades, it's always been in there in each platform, Republican and Democrat, to support this position. So in a way, they are they've been a bit hypocritical, and you might argue that Trump's not a hypocrite. You know, he said that he wants to make Jerusalem the capital, and we'll move our embassy there without looking at why did the other presidents always postpone it. But just what this means, it's hard to say. We sort of hope it means that for just practical reasons that the less we do is better, and that we shouldn't be the policemen of the world, and we shouldn't be the policemen of the Middle East. Policing the Middle East has been going on for too many years. It used to be the Europeans that would invade and tell exactly what the setting should be in the Middle East, more so than us, because, you know, the crusades they're pretty old. But now, if some people consider it a crusade when we go into the Middle East, but right now it's we who are the ones that are trying to settle this and direct the public opinion over there. I think it's foolish. I think that these kind of things come up just as an indication for us to reconsider that it's not in our interest, it's not part of our Constitution, we don't have the money to do it, and many times it does exactly the opposite. I don't believe our active involvement there really helps Israel in the long run, and certainly if we're helping Iran, with many of the outcomes benefiting them rather than Israel, I would say it's time for us to reconsider it. Reconsider it now before the financial system brings our empire down. But history shows that most of the time an empire that overextends itself comes down not because we are defeated overseas or the empire is defeated overseas as much as it's defeated at home. And certainly we're on attack here. Our civil liberties are under attack, and our financial system is under attack, and our whole operation, due to the debt that we're running up, it's under attack. So it's time for us to reassess this whole problem of the consequence of our foreign policy. And I say, let's keep voting and keep working for a non-interventionist foreign policy. That is the road to peace and prosperity. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.